Well, good morning, everybody. I just want to start off by giving you a quick overview of what we're going to cover today. In addition to the two powerful storm systems that currently flank North America, one that just left the East Coast and one that's about to hit California with kind of its second and third punches this week, I want to tell you that at the end of this forecast video, I've got some new long-range information I just want to discuss with you about what I think this spring and summer might look like. So if that's all you're interested in, just squeeze over to this part of the video. You just grab that slider bar along the bottom. And then at the very end, I'm going to give you a quick update on the longer range for South America as well. Okay, but the map we've been talking over here, it looks at the last 72 hours through last night or last evening in terms of snowfall. And as you can see here, we kind of painted this nice stripe right here across the country, which ended up resulting with some pretty heavy snows throughout parts of the Midwest getting into the Northeast. This was enhanced by some lake effect as well. What I actually really love about this map was that a lot of the snow came in on ground that was unfrozen, which means as this melts, it's going to soak in, and it's been melting quickly. And then this is an area that we need to be adding more snow to. I'm talking about parts of the central northern Rockies, the Cascades. This is a region that we need to see this continue to come up in terms of snowpack. But I want to show you some satellite data. I'm getting a little bit of a late start today. I'm down in Destin, Florida, and I don't know, my brain thought I was on East Coast time, so I tried to give myself a little extra sleep after getting in around midnight last night, and I forgot I was on Central time, so I apologize, this is a little bit late. But you can see as the sun was rising this morning, some of the snow that's still on the ground across the Northeast. But I'm going to take you back to yesterday and show you this stripe of snow through here, because strong sun angles, high sun angles came in and really just worked hard on melting that snow. What I also love about this is there is a very interesting geographical feature right here, major change in elevation. And you can actually see how that's influencing a little bit of a downslope wind right in this area and creating a little bit warmer conditions. And that's why you can actually see this little spot in through here where the snow is melting faster. But throughout the day yesterday, pretty quick melt on this snow overall. Now, I flew out of St. Louis over to Charlotte and then Charlotte down to Destin last night. So I got to fly over some of the snow, and I was taking pictures out of my window. I wonder what people think when I do this, but whatever. That's the Mississippi River, so you're kind of looking toward the south in this direction. And I just love to see this because imagine, you're this guy right here and your neighbor is this guy right here, right? And the snowfall forecast comes in and says, you might get 2-3 inches of snow. And this guy, says, wow, they blew it. And this guy's like, oh, wow, it's a fantastic forecast. This is how hyper-local weather events are. It's the same way with rainfall, hail event, everything. Any kind of weather you can think about. Just remember how very precise these changes are in the type. And that's what makes it forecasting so tricky. I talk all the time about the European model, right? Do you know that model's resolution is 9 kilometers by 9 kilometers? So each pixel it forecasts is huge. And that's why often there are errors at the local level. So I just thought you might want to see that as I was flying over parts of southern Illinois just to kind of get a good look at how, hyper-local those boundaries are. I also noticed this on satellite last night. Let's go back to this. So if you just take a look at parts of the Mid-South, look into Arkansas, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Oklahoma, there were prescribed burns last night. And you can see the smoke showing up pretty clearly here on satellite as well. Just another neat aspect of what's going on. But I'll be honest, when I landed and I jumped on just to have a quick look at the weather, it's these two deep lows that kind of flank North America that are going to be most interesting to watch. And of course, we're going to focus more on the one coming into the West Coast in a moment. But I want to show you this very, very powerful low spinning up just south of Greenland at the jet stream level has some pretty rip-roaring winds. Look at how fast this is coming into this part of, just south of like Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, Maine, this region right in through here. And so I went to FlightAware. I was just tracking a flight this morning. Let me take you back and show you this flight. So it left JFK, and for a little while there, take a look right here. It had a planned ground speed of, at this time, about 600 miles an hour. And but its actual flight speed in that wind was 794. So they did eventually come down. I wonder if it got too choppy, to be honest. So they knocked off about 100 miles an hour. Well, not quite, but about 60 miles an hour in speed, probably to get out of the worst of those winds. Probably made for a pretty bumpy flight overall. Okay, from here, get back to the West Coast. We have a pretty substantial and large low pressure system that's got an interesting trajectory on it. And what I mean by that is this low is actually going to move more north than it is to the east. So it's going to continue to open up this stream of moisture into California, as you can see here on this water vapor image. But what we've got going on here is really strong winds on the backside like this and strong winds on the east side like that, which means this low is going to move toward, well, the Puget Sound, not into Northern California. You can maybe see a little bit better here. If you notice, here is the strong wind on the backside. Far to the south, you have this, and right there. So the low that's kind of stacked up in the middle, its trajectory is going to go more like this rather than running over the top of the mountains. So we'll have to watch the evolution of the jet stream level winds extremely carefully over the next 10 days because there is some change coming, and I'm excited to kind of give you another iteration on that story here in a few moments. But that's just a quick look at what you got going on across the country today. Now, it's kind of a rare thing to see this, but the Storm Prediction Center has issued a slight risk for severe storms, including a 5% chance of tornadoes within that area. There's also wind and hail threat. So if you're in this part of California's Central Valley today, please be very weather aware that there is risk of strong to severe thunderstorms. Most of this is being, created by this highly sheared environment in this area. So the wind shear profile matches what would be needed to create rotating thunderstorms in this region. And just given the forcing, how powerful that system is, we're not going to have any trouble just tossing air up in the atmosphere and giving it its best potential for putting down severe weather. So that's going to be a very important thing to be watching. Now, across the west, through a little after 6 a.m. this morning, we do have flood watches that line most of California's coast and also in the Central Valley. Winter storm warnings for the Sierra Nevada. High wind with this system as well. And outside of that, there's not a whole lot going on around the rest of the country. It was a pretty chilly morning for many down in the southeast. In fact, there was a frost advisory that was out, for this part of Florida and Georgia very early this morning, just given how, not a frost advisory. This would actually be, that was a freeze watch. Sorry, I got the colors wrong. A freeze watch. I don't know that they got down to it, but it was pretty chilly down here as the temperatures from this last cold wave that came through the country finally start to exit to the east. Now, just to show you what's going on in California, this is a loop here, a long loop of the radar across the west. And once again, just repeated onshore flow here coming out of the southwest, just hitting the area pretty hard. And through 6 a.m., we had already added up over the weekend, some places picking up over 6 inches of rainfall, and more is expected to come. Now, the pattern is what is just fascinating to me. So here's the low that's creating this. But I'll be honest, I'm much more interested in what's going on here in the Aleutian Islands. And I'm going to show you why. Because that deep low, as it curls up, watch this, see this? Curls up right here. That one's going to keep the flow going into California for a while. Now, you have a second system that's coming in. It's this guy right here. But this particular boundary between this deep cold over the Bering Sea and the more warmer air that's to the south is what's invigorating by the 21st, 22nd, 23rd, the polar jet stream. The subtropical jet's driving all of this and this. But as we go forward, this is this Wednesday into Thursday and Friday. Two things are happening. By Friday, another deep low comes into California. And then after that, watch this guy right here. Okay, as this one sits and spins off the coast, watch this one come in. This is by Sunday into Monday and Tuesday. Now, they end up working together. Are you watching this right here and here? What happens is they work together and then kick this big wave across the mountains. Now, this is the very end of February. I'm talking about this right there. And if that does occur, and we kick that guy out, that trough is a pretty good signal that we need to be aware of the risk of a pretty deep system coming off of the Rocky Mountains. This is also going to really shove a bunch of flow, colder air into the Pacific Northwest, which is good for snow. And then as we get into the month of March, watch this deeper trough just live in the Northwest. And anytime we see a flow pattern like this setting up for spring, it is one that gets us just concerned about the risk of some early severe weather risks. I can't give any details on it yet because this is the only kind of clues we have as to what could be happening. We talked about it a lot last week as being the potential setup. So if you just kind of went to a textbook on severe weather and say, what do you want? You want a deep west coast trough that goes over the Four Corners states, and it's got to run up over a ridge in the east. That's southwest flow. That is what's indicating that March could come in if this is right. Okay, got to be very careful here. If this trend continues, that March could be a really active go of it. But as you saw, there are still 2 waves to hit California before all of this sets up. And that's why if I just zoom in on California and look at the total amount of precipitation, this is the first one through Tuesday into Wednesday. Then we get a little bit of a lull, and then you're going to see, watch this. This is Thursday. There's the lull getting into Friday. That's when the second push comes in. See it curling up there? Watch right in this area. This is Friday into Saturday, giving us another push of moisture. And so out about a week, we do have in the model, okay, so this is in the model, the potential for grabbing another 3 to 6 inches of total liquid out of this. And what that's going to do is that's really going to also crank up the snow levels. I'll show you the snow in a few moments here as well, because I want to include what's coming into the northwest. In fact, just take a look. See how it really increases in the northwest just in the last 3 or 4 days of the model run here. So from day 7 to 10. Now we don't use this as, kind of the truth. We're just using this as an indicator as to what's coming in. So I'm going to be watching that carefully. Okay, can we compare the models? GFS left, European right. So we watch for most of this week the actions in the West Coast. So that's getting us through Monday night, playing out through Tuesday afternoon and evening, getting us down to Wednesday. Now remember, we get a little bit of a break at that point. Could we get a system that comes out in the central United States at this time? We are getting indications in both models of something like that occurring, including some snow in the central Rockies here. But we'll watch. Again, that time frame is like Wednesday into Thursday, really, and then playing out to Friday. Something moves out of that system that's coming into the west and gets to the East Coast. We'll talk about that later this week. That's, again, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. But then here comes the second deep low by Saturday into Sunday, and that one spins in, and then watch. All of a sudden, because of the invigoration of the North Pacific jet, we start to get this action coming in. When does that happen? That's really Sunday night into Monday of next week. See that? And that's going to change everything. Because if you start bringing in flow like this, plus there's flow like this, it all has to come out. It all has to come out in the midsection of the country. And right in through there, there's going to be something next Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday that we're going to have to watch. And could it be the right setup to hit the northern plains? Could it open up a large, severe sector in this area? I think it could. Now, I don't have any details. I'm just telling you the pattern is the right look for something like that to occur. So let's go ahead and add all this up in the European model first. This is total precipitation. So through Wednesday, almost all the action is going to be in the West Coast, quite a bit of heavy precip. Remember, from Thursday into Friday, we have the system that rolls right in through here. And let's go ahead and play out into next Sunday night. Now remember, after this, watch this area and then keep an eye here. This is next Sunday. If I just play through midweek next week, again, Sunday through midweek next week, do you see the change happening? You can almost even see the flow and the streaks in the model. It's coming out like this. We got to get that turned around, get that southwest flow to really crank this up. What about the GFS? That's through day 7. Does it do the same thing day 7 through 10? The answer is yes. See that? So that will be the critical thing to watch. Day 7 through 10, do we get something on the combined flow from the polar jet, subtropical jet to release something in the midsection of the country? And it would have all kind of high impact aspects. Snow to the north, heavy rains, potential for severe weather to the south. Now on the snowy side of it, let's go ahead and add up the high-res Euro model all the way through the next week. And again, we could get snowfall totals here in the 2 to 4 foot range in the Sierra Nevada with the system coming through, some heavier snow here in this part of the Central Rockies. But here we are next Saturday. Watch, from next Saturday into Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Do you see where that snowfall amounts came up? Right where I want to see them coming up. And if you go to the GFS, it does the same thing. Now, that's out 10 days or so. We start to see increases of snow here and here. And why I'm so concerned about that, again, we talked about this a lot last week. This is that area that still needs a lot more snow. The Sierra Nevada, the Cascades. I don't know why I keep confusing those this year. The Cascades, Sierra Nevada are down here, and then the Northern Rockies. And then if we can get some moisture into the Northern Plains, this is an area that since the beginning of the new year has largely been left out of this flow. I'm talking about parts of Montana, the Dakotas, Minnesota, Wisconsin, the UP, and Michigan. And just a focal area of getting moisture to return to this spot before we get into, fully into spring. We need to get quite a bit more snow up here overall, to be honest, at the end of February, beginning of March. Okay, until then, most of the next 10 days are drier in these areas. This is the probability of getting less than 1/10 of an inch. If we take this over to the wetter side of things, these are the folks that are going to see, whoops, got a new model right in there. These are the folks that are going to see the best chance at getting over an inch. So it is the whole of the West Coast almost, and then this region through here around the Ohio River Valley has the highest probability. We stepped that up to 2 inches. Again, wow, that is a lot of moisture in through there, and this is the chance of 4. So we know we're going to be watching these next 2 systems. Then what follows this next Sunday, Monday, Tuesday coming into the northern parts of the West Coast. Okay, one more time. This is this Friday, and this is Saturday. Now, what am I watching? Jet retracts. Here's the subtropical branch. See how that's coming in like this? Here's the polar branch. Now, you watch. They're going to come in together here. This is Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Look at that. This is Wednesday, Thursday. Now, what are we looking at here? Now, this is way far out there in the models. I'm 3-hour 306. Retracted jet. Split is here. Northern branch comes in. Southern branch supports. That particular setup, this and this, has got to be something we watch every day. Between now and the beginning of March, that's it. We got to watch that setup. Okay? Right now, some of the long range models are picking up that by the time we get out there, at the end of February, beginning of March, activity increases in the Northwest and then starts to increase across the central United States. The GFS will pick this up soon. It's way off right now. So look at these 2 forecast models. Got to be watching this carefully. And by the way, if March starts off that way, we tend to see that the longer range models continue to paint this whole corridor active. And again, if that flow has to come into the Northwest, I don't know why they're showing up so dry here. That's your new March update from the ECMW. Pretty consistent from last week's model runs. Okay, quickly back over to the temperatures. What's helping a lot of this on is the extremely cold air here, and the contrast between that and Southeast Asia and India. That is what I think is the catalyst for driving this change in the pattern. It's what's really going to retract the jet and just get it screaming coming off of this part of Asia. But that's going to set up for more disturbances to roll across the Pacific Ocean as we go forward in time. Now, given that that's our longer term setup, let's come back and talk about short term temperatures. This is today's highs. Expect a lot of that snow to be gone. This is into Tuesday and Wednesday. Look at that. 80s down into Texas, 50s and 60s as far north as Iowa, northern Illinois, southern Wisconsin, hitting parts of Nebraska as well. And then we get up here to Thursday. Watch the mild air move east finally. And we just don't replace it with cold air. I mean, it's a little chilly in New England, but we bring back in a whole lot of warm conditions into the central United States. And the day 5 through 10 outlook from the GFS ensemble looks like that. And even the day 10 through 15 is still overall mild across much of North America, save Alaska. Is that echoed in the European ensemble? It is. That's day 5 through 10. You can make an argument that the day 10 through 15 in the European is even more mild than what the GFS suggests. But anytime we see going into spring West Coast cool conditions, there has to be troughs there. And if it's mild east, the jet's going to have to come over the mountains and kick something off in this area. So we need to watch it very, very carefully. Now, is there a source of colder air going longer term? Right now, it's certainly not coming from any sort of tropical teleconnection. As we've been talking about, it feels like for about 3 weeks now, the MJO's forecast of collapse is still there, which means we're losing that tropical signal. And then if we look for the polar vortex to be a source of cold air, it's still hanging out on this side of the planet over in Russia. And by all indications, it's going to stay there despite this relatively strong, ridge in the stratosphere pushing against it, hoping to disrupt it. It just doesn't. So I don't see any sort of an important teleconnection for North America in the placement of the polar vortex all the way through the end of February. Seems to want to stay on the other side of the planet here. So thinking about all of that, I want to do something with you for the long range. I presented this last week, and I want to review it with you and give you another idea about this. These are the dynamical models, right? So I have the National Multi-Model Ensemble on the left. I have the European Seasonal Outlook on the right. They look very similar. I mean, we could look at the patterns and say overall they match pretty well. Now, how well do these models typically do? Well, I told you last spring they had negative skill scores. They were completely wrong about spring. But they were also not in as good as agreement in terms of their patterns as they are this year for March, April, and May. So the greens are wet and the browns, and this is all dry, or drier, excuse me. So we look at that, and then we want to compare it also to what the government released. This was the CPC forecast released late last week. And overall, do you see some similarities? I see some similarities. Something about here with drier conditions, maybe a little drier in the northwest, and this whole region wetter. That shows up in 1, 2, and now 3 different models. But I want to just I want to at least propose an alternative idea to this, because last year I got burned by these models pretty bad in spring. So we do know that we have this El Nino that continues to fade very slowly. And I've made an argument multiple times that in summer we got to watch the ocean temperatures here. The colder they get, the greater the drought risk in the central United States, the less the drought and heat risk is in the west. So we're going to watch that very carefully. The late season hurricane threat will come from the very mild ocean temperatures still sit here. But what about El Nino and its pace at which it slows down? So what I did was I took every single El Nino year since 1950, and I grabbed March to May for those years. Now, every single one of these years you have up here, the El Nino, just like this year, was fading. That's what they do in spring. And what I found was, now notice the color bar goes from -3 inches to 3 inches, and this is 3 months. So we saw a little bit of drier conditions in parts of the Ohio Valley, drier across the northern tier of the United States, including the Pacific Northwest. And especially in March, we punched quite a bit of moisture in like this and kept the southeast very wet. That was March to May, okay? So what we need to think about here is, how does that line up against the forecast models that I showed a moment ago? Well, the models are quite a bit wetter than what history would tell us. What history would tell us here. So we need to consider that going forward, that there could actually be more open windows, especially in April and May, for much of the central United States to get crops planted and get going. Now, that's not a bad thing, but I just don't want to see any of that dryness linger. Could we get a pretty active severe weather season start to the south? I think we could. There's some early indications of that, but I'm not right now. I'm not overly worried about a hyperactive severe weather season. That could change, but I just want to let you know that right now I'm not. Okay, from there, I want to show you the May, June, July. So what we noticed and talked about last week was that coming out of Mexico, running up the western and high plains, both models attempted to kind of dry things out, including the NMME, which went a little drier in the northwest as well. Whereas the European just kept a lot of storm activity going on in this area. What we're going to do is we're going to compare that to the new update from the government, the CPC, May, June, July. And you can see a very similar story, right? So we're going to dry up the western plains into the northwest and then wetter here. The analogs, if you use all of them, show actually the drier conditions may be more into this corridor and then anchored down here in parts of the Cotton Belt, getting over to the Delta and then maybe into New England as well. What is interesting is there are very few climate reporting districts in all of the analog years when put together that show up wet. Now, there's a lot of white in there too, meaning that we've washed out any signal. I think it's really important for you to know and understand, because I've got years like 88 and 83 in here, and those were super, super dry years. They're biasing this whole thing in a big way. But there are also some wet years in here too. So you got to understand, every El Nino has a different flavor. Now, what flavor do we think this El Nino has? So if I went back and looked at the closest match to this ocean temperature pattern, it's got to be 2016. And 2016 isn't even that close. I mean, look at the North Pacific. So much cold water was here by February in the North Pacific. We don't have that this year. So that's one major difference. But most other places around the planet, watch again, this is 2024, this is 2016. There's some similarities to it. So can I show you what happened in 2016 March to May? We tended to bring in a pretty solid return of moisture here and into the south. It was drier anywhere. It was toward the Appalachian Mountains in Tennessee, northern Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, like this area right in through here. And to be off, it wasn't as though this was dry, but it was a bit drier than normal. Now that's March to May. What if we came in here and said, let's now go from May, June, and July, since those are the time periods we did, only using 2016, And that particular year, if this will go, okay, it's kind of a patchwork. There were drier spots in the Western Corn Belt, but wetter across a section of the Central and Eastern Corn Belt. Drier here to New England. I mean, this is such an interesting layout of a single year. Dry, very dry in the southeast. So I'm guessing, I'll have to go back and look at this, but I'm guessing there was ridging here. And we saw a lot of just thunderstorms rolling over the top of this ridge at times. But that's what happened. Now, you look at the whole growing season. Why don't we just do this? Let's start in April and go clear to October of 2016. And if we measure all of that, I mean, that's what you end up getting. I think the whole April to October time frame showed that the southeast and mid-south tended to struggle. Well, I got to be very careful saying southeast because it didn't get all the way to the coast here. But this region right in through here was the spot that struggled with drought development. So that's just a single analog year. We got to be super careful using that. But I want to add to this whole analysis, now that I've kind of presented two alternative views here, one with analogs, one with the single, or three, I guess, dynamical models, analogs, and then a single analog year. And we're going to back this all up with this. This was just released late on Friday. This is the March, April, May forecast from the NMME. Well, it is partly the NMME, but it is a statistical it's a statistical approach on the dynamical models to see if we can improve accuracy. Does that make sense? I don't know. Well, this is March, April, May, and overall, that's the key area that we're looking in on for dryness. If we go to May, June, July, the models are a little drier here in the plains in Northern California, and then June, July, August want to anchor the driest conditions in the Western Corn Belt, winter wheat belt here east of the Rockies, and then throughout much of the northern part of the Great Basin, Snake River Valley, this region for midsummer. It's just another look. It's another potential, and I've got to spend some time figuring this out this week and next week to kind of give you a much more solid picture. But I do want to do this. Can we come back to March, April, May, and now go to South America? Because the latest IRI multi-model probability forecast went dry again for the safrinha crop. And that's actually showing up in the 1 month outlook for March in Mato Grosso and north. Wet in Argentina, wet in the northeast, but drier through here. And that's going to be critical to watch because the success of the crop going in right now is probably pretty good. But over the next 15 days, plenty of rain in that area. Good rains in parts of Argentina, a little drier near Buenos Aires, southern Uruguay. But got to watch this carefully to see how this moisture comes in over the coming weeks and months for South America. So you can tell we got a pretty interesting storyline to follow this week, and I look forward to picking up again tomorrow. Thanks.